I'm live. It's pausing due to Wow. Welcome to Coram Deo's first ever live Q&A discussion on our topics that we discuss. So we've been doing a series on identity. We just switched topics. It's a subtopic of fitting in. So we're allowed to ask questions, talk about anything really, but we're trying to focus on those topics. I'm Pastor Samuel, if you don't know me. I've been the youth pastor here for 2 years.
Feels so much longer.
2 years.
It does. Like in a good way.
In a good way. Yeah. It feels like an eternity that you've been here. This is my main man, Philip. He basically, he helps run everything. He is New Life royalty, basically. One of the very few. It's basically you and my wife that are New Life royalty. Hey, Rachel. Hey, beautiful. I love you. That was incredibly awkward for everybody except for us. So Q&A. Anyone have any questions? We also got our second man, Daniel,
Hi.
also known as Young Tom Selleck. He's working on the stash. And we got our fourth guy, Nathan, who is now hiding away behind the couch. So, identity, sonship, fitting in. Let's discuss. What do we got? Any questions?
Well, what is sonship?
Sonship is a very important. It's really the basis of your walk with Jesus. And Christianity has gotten really difficult because we've left sonship and made other things our identity. So like as a son, I can fail and know that I'm still going to be a son. As a pastor, if I fail, I'm not going to still be a pastor, right? Like, there's a certain point of failure that no one's going to be okay with me being a pastor. But I could continuously fail and still be a son. Like, I could be a total screw up and my dad will still love me, right? So the same applies with our relationship with the Lord. But if we don't actually understand and put that definition in our walk with Jesus, then we're more prone to working for our identity. We're performing for love and performing for acceptance. Whereas my son, he doesn't have to perform a certain way to be my son. In fact, he doesn't perform a certain way and he's still my son, right? Like, so it's actually a very dangerous thing not to understand our identity as Christians, because that is why people get angry with the church, angry with God, and walk away because they don't understand. It's actually, like I tell you guys all the time, I'm not a pastor first. Like, I'm a son. So whether I'm a great pastor or not, I'm good. You know, whether I'm succeeding or failing, you know, it's like, oh man, I should do a better job at this. Or someone comes to me with some criticisms, like, okay, all right, that's a good piece of feedback, thank you. But it's not an attack on who I am, because that's not my utmost identity as a pastor. I'm a son of God. So I could be doing whatever, and I'm still going to be who God made me to be. Which, in most applications, every job I've had, I'm basically do the same thing, and that's being a pastor. People don't know that's what I'm doing, but that's what I'm doing. Yeah, that's sonship.
I have a question.
Camera lady has a question.
Today you talked.
Oh, we didn't say who the camera lady was.
Hi.
Tabitha is the camera lady.
I just have a question because of all of this, like the identity, the fitting in. I just wanted to what was it like for you growing up, and when was that moment or progression when you realized this is never gonna work?
Okay, so the question was, what was that journey like for me as a kid?
Yeah.
Growing up and finding that identity. Is that correct? Like that the world isn't going to work. Okay, well, I never fit in, ever. Never will. If you were here for that sermon, you understand my point. We're not made to fit in. I was clearly not made to fit in. And it's basically from birth, because my mother asked for me and named me Samuel, just like the story in the Bible. So I was a weirdo from the start. Couldn't get away from it.
Why? What made you weird?
What made me weird? So I am intense about a lot of things, and my intensity can scare people. I've gotten better at kind of controlling my intensity. Certain things that most people don't care about. I never cared about sports that much. I never really cared about like school. I never did. I just never did. I really was sensitive to the Lord. I was a very sensitive child, and I was a very imaginative child, and I really loved history, which nobody cares about ever, I feel like. So all of those things kind of made it that way. And I was also homeschooled, which was baffling to people. And I was a pastor's kid. So all of those things made me very not fitting in. Like as a pastor's kid, it was a big church. You know, everybody kind of singles you out. Everyone has their own idea of what a pastor's kid's life is like. Like I get all these extra things or whatever. Not knowing that most pastors are just poor. So anyway, so that journey for me was pretty hard, actually. Like I said, I didn't fit in, and everybody wants to fit in, but I didn't know that was an impossible goal, and I didn't know that like most everybody doesn't fit in. Like they don't have that feeling. Like, did you ever feel like you fit in?
I never felt like I fit in. I definitely tried. Like I spent like all my childhood basically fitting in, but I knew that it was impossible for me, but I didn't think it was impossible for everybody else.
Right.
That was
yes.
The thing.
Yeah. So I moved to America, which didn't help because I was a foreign kid, but I looked like not a foreign kid. So there was just stuff I didn't understand, like football. I had no idea.
Is that hockey with your hands?
Yeah, like people know about football in Canada, but like I said, I didn't care about sports. So all of the hockey stuff I learned by osmosis, not by trying. But like football, it wasn't that prevalent, so I didn't. Anyway, so I remember in school, when I first started going to public school, playing football, and then they were like 7 points when somebody got a touchdown, and I was like, what? 7 points? Come on! Because in hockey, if you get a goal, it's 1. So I was like, what the heck? And they were like, dude, that's the normal touchdown score.
It's actually 6.
It is 6, but there was no kicking because it was 5th grade, so they just said 7. So all that to say, it kind of came to a head in middle school where, I mean, everyone just hates life, I think. But I didn't know that. So I was just like super kind of angry with the world, and I didn't care. I kept to myself as much as possible. And instead of trying to fit in, I just was desperately trying not to be seen at all. And it really didn't work out very well for my soul because I was just dying inside.
What sucks?
Oh yeah, I actually struggle with self-hatred so much that I have a theory. I was sick so much. I hated myself constantly. which is crazy because I was pretty talented and people liked me. Like, looking back, I was like, I totally could have been popular if I wanted to, but it was all in my head. Like, I played guitar and chicks dig that. And I did the talent show. And then in 6th grade, I did like 92 push-ups for the PE test, and everybody thought I was a god. And then in 7th grade, I don't know, I just was so overwhelmed with the change, because that, in where I lived, you go to a middle school and you get a locker and all this stuff. So I was just like, this is so much. And so I really kind of tried to be invisible and try to fit in. And not really fit in, actually, just people leave me alone. And I was so worried about what people, actually just being seen. So I was just pre-rejecting myself, right? And 8th grade got better, but I still was so much rejecting myself in like self-protection that I never actually opened up to anybody. Like, I could have had friends. Like, people reached out to hang out, and I would say no. I would just stay home. All the while, like, really not applying myself in school because I believed that I was stupid. Somebody tripped me first week of school. Some beautiful individual who's grown up now and maybe less of a jerk tripped me, and I broke my thumb, my left thumb, which I'm left-handed. So I fell way behind. And then they just put me in a separate classroom with all these people who are like falling behind. So I was like, oh, they put me in dumb people classes. So that didn't help either. So this whole mess is happening in my soul. Whole mess is happening. And so by 8th grade, I graduate 8th grade, and I totally hate public school. Like, absolutely hate it. I hate getting up that early. Like, why? Someone tell me why people think it's a good thing to start school so flippin' early. Like, why? I don't understand. Anyway, it's for the parents.
I'm okay with school starting at 7.
Yeah, well, you're weird. And it's great that you're weird. Own it. Own it, Tom Selleck. So I was in the middle of deciding if I should go to public school or be homeschooled. And this was a big deal for me because for as long as I can remember, I wanted to be in the military. So if I wasn't in the military, I would have been... No, if I'm not a pastor, I would have been in the military. And so it was a big decision for me. For whatever reason, I knew I equated public school to being in the military because I was going to do the whole ROTC program, go to college, become an officer. Don't tell me why, but that's what it was in my head. And if I did homeschooled, then that wasn't going to happen. Like, I knew for some reason that was connected. And so I really hated public school, though. And I was like, this does not seem to be working out. I don't like what's being produced. I don't like the people around me. I don't like the sexualization of the culture. I don't like how, like, people, like, hate on God. Like, people laughed at me for believing in God in science class and all this kind of stuff, right? So I was just like, I don't think I really want to do this, you know? And in that time, 8th grade, after 8th grade, my oldest sister was getting married, and my older brother. And my older brother and I are super close. We're super close growing up. And so there was lots of changes. And I was just like, man, this is a decision that I need to make. And then my dad brought home a Hillsong DVD, and it was that album that had With Everything on it. You know that song? With Everything.
Yeah.
And so we're watching that, and I was like, man, that's so cool. Like, people are like worshiping and they like it, and they're like having a good time, and it looks fun. So cool. And then By the end, they do the song with everything, and I'm like trying not to cry. My brother's trying not to cry. My dad's just crying. Anyway, classic. And so I just hear God saying, like, I was like, man, I want that. And God's like, you'll have it. And so from that encounter with the Lord, really, I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to actually try this. I'm going to be homeschooled, and I'm going to give myself to worshiping the Lord and pursuing that. And from that moment on, that was like the deciding factor in my life. Like, I'm just not going to try to fit in. Because I think I was like, okay, I relegated myself to the military I like history, I like guns, I like being fit. It's intense, right? Like, it's an intense, it appears to be intense. My brother's in the Army, and he says there's a lot of things that are super boring. So it's not always intense, but it would give that outlet for me. But it was also because I didn't think I was good enough to do anything else. So, 10 more minutes. So then that was the point where I was like, I'm just not going to fit in, and that's okay. And I just decided to go for it and not care as much. And it was a progression, obviously. It wasn't like, oh yeah, I feel great now. But slowly, after making that decision, I was able to break through those things of like self-hatred and, excuse me, I'm sure that sounded great in the microphone. And just being comfortable with what God gave me and being cool with that. To the point where I got dreadlocks and I grew out my hair. Like, I was just like, yep, I'm weird. Yeah, that's what happened. And there was a whole lot of other years after that, but that's kind of how that went for me. It was just like I had to decide. I just had to choose, like, you know what? I'm going to be me, and I'm going to be okay with being me. And I actually purposefully did things to make myself believe that. Like, when I was leading worship and there was a new song that we were about to do, this like same time period, and it was like a more upbeat song. Nobody did this before me at this church, but I decided to dance while I was singing and dance around and stuff. And I was like, I'm just going to do it. I don't care. I'm just doing it. And I just didn't think about it. I was like, I'm doing it. Yep.
And you were talking about in your sermon today that self-hatred is like connected with that fitting in identity. And I can relate to that because like I hated myself like profusely.
Yeah.
Like I, growing up, like I was at a point where like I didn't even think I could have an identity. Like that was my identity.
Yeah.
I didn't have an identity.
Right.
And so I would fill it with trying to fit in with certain crowds. So there were the kids that were really athletic and sporty. Even though I didn't do sports, I always tried to stay skinny to kind of like fool them into thinking that I was athletic. And then there were the gamer kids, which really it was gamer / anything entertainment wise. It didn't have to be games, but they were mainly gamer kids. And then there were the weird anime kids. Even though like I didn't like I hated anime growing up, I was still hanging out with them just because they gave off this sense of weirdness that I gave myself, and so I felt like I could like belong with them. Like I was like matching their weirdness. So there was like these group of kids that I would just always hang out with, and I would like every time I would feel like it wasn't working, like I wasn't feeling satisfied, I'd always like move to like the next group. Like I was always circling
morphing
groups. Yeah. So like I wasn't realizing why I was doing it, but like I just didn't feel fulfilled.
Right.
Like fitting in doesn't fill you. Like
Right.
I always thought that did, but that was only because I was moving to each group every single time I saw that gauge going to empty. So
Yeah.
I was tricking myself into believing like, yes, I'm doing the right thing. And like I gave excuses to not having an identity. Like I was homeschooled for the first chunk of my life. So like I felt like I was an outcast at all my friends because everybody else I knew went to school. Like I knew 0 homeschool kids growing up. And so I used that as an excuse. I was scared to like be myself. Like I am a very extroverted person. I love people. I love being around people. People fill me up, give me energy. It's beautiful. But at the time, I was scared to like fulfill that need, and so I was constantly by myself, and that created this awkward atmosphere around people. And so
Well, that didn't really. That changed pretty recently too, right?
Yeah, that did change recently, but like as a kid, like that was super strong.
Yeah.
Just giving off this like awkward vibe, and so like people would then turn away from me just because like nobody wants to be somebody who's awkward, and I was like, oh man, this is just because I'm just this way.
Right.
Oh, what was me? And so yeah, awkwardness.
Self-fulfilling.
Yeah, it's really
kind of like what I was saying in the sermon. It's like people feel you trying to be something you're not in order to please them.
And even the friends that did like me and hang out with me, I never felt like I deserved any of them.
Right.
So I let them build up that friendship. Like I literally gave them everything.
Yeah.
Like, a relationship is both ways, no matter
right.
what it is.
Yeah.
But with me, I was like, oh, if I touch this, it'll break.
Mm-hmm.
So I let them carry it all, and like,
right.
It's nasty. It's nasty business when you don't have an identity. It
yes.
really is like.
Yeah. Well, because it actually, like, because you're rejecting yourself already, like you said, you're giving them all of it. Mm-hmm. So that person's going to get exhausted trying to build that bridge, right? To try and get to you. But this is why it's so important, is like, if you don't love yourself, like that's why the Bible says love your neighbor as yourself. Like you can't actually receive love if you don't love yourself, and you can't give love if you don't love yourself well. And you can't actually love yourself unless you have.
Yeah, like I can give examples of like trying to love others without loving myself first, and it always comes off of like just angry.
Yeah.
Like I remember talking to a few kids about Jesus, and I was like saying how much he loves them and stuff, but it would always turn into like this angry argument, and I'm like, why is this? And I actually heard, I'm pretty sure it was at like a camp, like there's so many good sermons at camp, and I remember hearing like loving yourself first, but I was like, well, of course I love myself. I love myself. I love myself. But I didn't actually love myself.
Yeah.
So trying to love others, like it's an impossible game that in your mind you think you can win, but you can only truly win it if you do love yourself. And conversations since actually loving myself have been like beautiful.
Yeah.
Like it's drastically different. It's insane. Like it's a big thing, but it's really like a little thing. Like it's just thinking one way or the other.
Yeah.
Loving yourself. Like it's so quick, but like it's drastically different.
Right.
Like the outcome is drastically different.
Yeah. So the indicator. So if you're like, do I hate myself? Am I believing that I'm a son? Ask yourself some questions and see some indicators in your life. Is it easy for me to love people? Am I really good at loving people? And if it's really hard for you to love others, then you actually don't love yourself, and you're not receiving love from God or others. Because like the Bible says, love your neighbor as yourself. That's an indicator. And then 2, what is your self-talk like? Imagine having a child and he's going around saying, oh, you're so stupid, to himself. And how would you feel about that? Now, we do that all the time to ourselves, and we think God doesn't care, but he does. So those are some questions that can help you on your journey to becoming more of a son. And just today, if you're listening and you're like, oh man, this really resonates, I really struggle with hating myself and blah, blah, blah. Just choose today that you're going to be okay with who God made you to be. You're going to love who God made you to be, and start stepping out and start believing those things. And you know what? Reach out to us. Reach out to us. Come to youth group. If you're too old to be in youth group and you're not even around here, you can reach out to us on our Instagram page. If you need some next steps or if you want some accountability, please do so. Reach out to us, message us. We'd love to help you out. So thanks for joining us on our first ever Q&A, and we'll be here next week. Come check it out.